It's such a strange transition from all the percussive thump ba da bum ba dum ba dum bum to our little
It, you know,
la dee dee.
you know, it is. I never thought about it. I wouldn't say strange. I would have just said abrupt, but yeah, when you think
Yeah,
about it, because I love the bump up, so I'm always
yeah,
doing the, I'm always doing a little thing back here, and then I just get into, okay,
yeah.
so,
That's what I would normally be leaning toward myself. The grandeur and the fanfares and the rock guitar and the percussion and all the rest of that, and then we're doing a program, a podcast about prayer. So perhaps we can take it down a notch and be a little
well,
bit peaceful.
it's all about perception. It's whatever people like or whatever. I don't know. It's fine.
Yeah,
Whatever works for you.
yeah. And speaking of that, we should mention that this is the Practical Prayer Podcast pre-show program on New Thought Media Network. We are live. This is kind of our studio audience, so you guys who are on Facebook and YouTube are able to put a note into the comments, or you can go to bethelight.com, be-the-light.com, and there's a comment button there if you want to say something about the show, preferably something uplifting. We do take criticism as well if it's absolutely warranted. You can also have pose a question or request a prayer, and we will incorporate that into an upcoming episode. bethelight.com. And so this is the time when we get to chat with each other. And the thing that has been on my mind lately is Mercury retrograde.
Oh,
Oh man, this one has been kicking my tail.
you know what? This is going to sound terribly insensitive, but I'm so glad to hear you say that because
I know exactly why.
because it's been doing us in over here. And you're like, is that what this is? This is rough. So it's not just us.
It's a thing. And it's
Yeah.
hard to tell if the Mercury retrograde causes communication problems or if it's coincidence or if it's mass belief or how that works. But I do remember back in the good old days working for technology companies, sometimes stuff would just stop working. And there was no reason why it stopped working. So we would just say, must be sunspots. The sun is throwing off extra radiation and that's interfering with our machine. Then on internet companies, we would say the same thing. System's been working just fine for 6 months. Now it went down today. And they all went down. And like, what's going on? Well, I don't know, sunspots. So there you have it.
Earlier this week, I'll be in here and something in studio and something's going wrong. And then I'll get frustrated because I forget about the retrograde. Like, how can you forget? But anyway, I walked down the hall one day and I said to Michael, I said, this is like ridiculous. Nothing is working. And he wasn't working. He said, oh, it's the retrograde. I'm waiting. Yeah, I'm doing something else. So, yeah, it's a thing.
Yeah, it's a working. I mean, and then it works, and we're coming out of it. It's the end of this week is when it's over. So not a moment too soon.
But
And
but it's 4 times a year, right? I understand. And so I'm thinking about like just organizing my work around the retrograde.
you can do that. And there have been times when there's been a Mercury retrograde, and it hasn't bothered me at all. And other times, like this one, where it was just a complete nuisance.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And for anybody who has not heard of Mercury retrograde, let me see if I can explain this in 30 seconds or less. So the orbit of the planet Mercury is inside the orbit of Earth. So when seen from Earth, when we watch Mercury, when it passes between us and the sun or on the other side of the sun, it looks like it's orbiting backwards. So it does a little dance where it's going around and then does a little back and forth. And that's the retrograde. Now, it's not actually Mercury doing anything different than it does. It's just the way that it looks from here. And when we're dealing with our electronics, that coincides with times that communication doesn't work. And it's not just electronics. Sometimes the electronics goes screwy. Sometimes somebody will say something that they think is perfectly clear, and I'll get a completely different message. It's like, no, you left out a noun. I did not know what you were talking about. I'm doing a wedding this weekend, and I said, and I can be at the rehearsal if you'd like or not. And she said, that would be great.
So, yeah.
I said, I asked you an or question. You can't give me that would be great. That's like, oh, I have a choice. That's great. Well, okay, pick one. And I pointed that out, and she was very apologetic and told me, yeah, you can stay home for the rehearsal.
That's this weekend coming up.
That's on Saturday, yeah.
Okay.
And I'm happy to go to the rehearsal and make sure that everything works together and that everybody knows where to stand and what to say and what to do. But the fact of the matter is, by the time they get to the wedding, these people have been walking for a long time. And, the wedding event manager at the venue can pretty much help them in where to stand and when to walk.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
No.
They can handle that.
Right. My job is that on Sunday morning they wake up married.
Can you handle that? I think you can handle that part.
That takes the pressure off. I mean, yes, of course, we're going to have a lovely ceremony. It's going to be meaningful and thoughtful and elegant and romantic and all the rest of that. And the goal of the project is that they're happily married by Sunday morning.
Mm-hmm. 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 You got to look on it.
Yeah, and I didn't think of that when I started officiating weddings. My partner and I thought of that when we were DJing weddings. Because there's much more that can go wrong DJing a wedding than officiating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can imagine that.
Yeah. Here's a point. Don't play the dance song, which was the wedding song for the divorced mother and father of the bride. Bad.
Yeah.
That's bad.
Yeah.
And don't even let somebody in the wedding party who's causing trouble request it.
So much can go on or goes on at weddings.
There's details.
Yeah. This is like ucky, but my husband, he loves the weddings. I prefer the funerals.
You certainly don't have any complaints.
You have no complaints. The person stays where they are. I'm trying to say it a little nicer than I normally would say it, because I don't know who's listening. But, married people sometimes don't stay married, but at the funeral, you can pretty much guarantee they're going to stay.
That's right. They're at the end of their dash. We got a comment from the network that Mercury retrograde is a false belief. There's so much packed into that. We could make an entire episode of that. No, Mercury retrograde is actually a thing. It's an astronomical thing, and it is the appearance of the planet. We actually plotted retrograde orbits when I was in physics class in high school. So it's actually a thing. Does it have a meaning as far as impacting our communications? No, that's a false belief. And in fact, it could be descriptive rather than prescriptive because it might just be a coincidence that it shows up when our communications are going sideways. And if there's a belief that every time there's one of these astronomical events, our communications are going to go screwy, well, then we can certainly bring that about. But that's an inside job. So yes, I agree and disagree all in the same breath.
Okay.
Should we just start the podcast?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
We'll talk about something easier.
Yeah, I can do.
A practical prayer is a prayer that works.
These discussions between Reverend Bill Marchiony and Carol Lawrence dive into the details of how it works and how to work it.
Reverend Bill is a New Thought minister and the author of Practical Prayer for Real Results.
Your new life begins with a new thought.
Carol Lawrence is on a spiritual quest, finding the New Thought teaching after decades on the pulpit in 3 different traditional denominations.
I've got some questions.
Together, they're exploring the philosophy and activities that come together from many of the world's religions to create the practical spirituality that is New Thought.
Welcome to the Practical Prayer Podcast. I'm Carol, here with Reverend Dr. Bill Marchiony.
And we're going to talk about your greatest fear. Actually, we're just going to talk about fear, which is what you wanted to talk about today. And there's so much that we can talk about and so much to unpack with fear. But what is it that's pinging you about fear?
It's I was having a conversation this weekend. Matter of fact, I was in a conference this weekend, and just a lot of talking about people having their wishes and things that they always wanted to do. And I was waiting each time to hear why it didn't happen. And oh, you didn't have enough money. Okay, that's a thing. But more often than not, it wasn't about money. It was about being, I could hear, it was the fear of what people would say, how it would be interpreted or received, and just a whole bunch of things, especially if it's just sort of out of the mainstream of the company that you keep or the folks that you're around. So I just, it's a big thing. It's a big thing.
So introducing a degree of wackiness or woo-woo into your life plan gets a reaction from the folks who are around you?
Say that a different way. Woo-woo. I mean...
I am done being a lawyer or a paralegal, and I am instead going to trade everything that I own for a tent and go live on a mountaintop and meditate. And people go, really?
Yeah, when you put it like that, yeah, I get a few reallys sometime. Even though, if you're listening, like, I'm not living on a mountain, everybody. But yeah, it's. I think you get to a point. I don't know if you can think your way out of fear. Wait. Let me just go back. Okay. So fear is a real thing because it paralyzes people from doing things that they can do, want to do, dreamed about, et cetera, et cetera. It's not going to go away until you make it go away, or you face it, or you talk to it in a sense and try to figure out, what about this that is making me so afraid to make this next step. And a lot of times, I won't say more often than not, but a lot of times it's about what people will say and what others will think that becomes this big, huge, scary monster. And the wonderful thing that you have inside to do often may not get done because of outside boogeyman kind of stuff.
Oh, absolutely. And overcome it, think through it, maybe. And perhaps what we want to do instead is deflate it. Because there's something to it. There's a reason that the fear is there. But a lot of times it just it feels so much bigger than it is. A little thing on the side of our side view mirror that says objects may be closer than they appear. Because the way that we're looking at stuff can make it look huge. Oh my God, it's right on top of me. When in fact, when we have a little bit of perspective, it may or may not be that. And I know exactly what you're talking about. In the end of 2019, I've been working a tech job for 5 years, and the time came for me to turn completely to ministry. And ministry was not nearly as precisely funded, shall we say, as the tech business.
I like that.
Yeah. So, and there's a need to fund this lifestyle that I have over here in Pennsylvania. And could I do it? Yeah. Would I have to spend more time and be much more inventive and ingenious than I was when I was going in and doing 8 hours a day at somebody else's company and collecting their paycheck? And the only thing that was unknown was whether or not the bonus was going to come in at the end of the quarter? Yeah. Yeah. And despite the fear, there was the step, because it turned out that there was something that was even more fearful about staying and doing that, because I was getting pushed into putting in more and more time and having less and less ability to do what I really wanted to be doing. So at some point it was like, okay, they have maneuvered me over to the trapdoor and I'm jumped through. And yeah, it was scary and faced my fears and, riding that. And, everything went according to plan. Because in the spring of 2020, it was everything that I've been planning. In the fall of 2019, went smoothly. Not. Was not counting on a pandemic. There were a bunch of things that we were going to do that we had to change. But, we were talking about the acronyms. What does FEAR actually stand for, the abbreviation? And the most common one is false evidence assumed or appearing real. So we're seeing this stuff, and we're assuming that it must be true. So whatever it is I'm afraid of is as big as the fearful thing that I'm looking at, and it's as meaningful as my currently petrified mind tells me. The other one is forget everything and react. You know something, forget it. Forget all that stuff I know. I'm just going to react.
You know what? Sometimes that's a good one, because I have all kind of little things that I've told myself through the years. What's the worst thing that's going to happen? Or I might, at one point, said to myself, what is the thing you're most afraid of happening? And I always said, the thing I'm afraid of most is somebody's like going to beat me up, right? Going to slap me. Well, that's not going to happen. Now, regardless of what I think will happen after the slap, I'm not...
I do not want to see what happens to somebody right after the slap happens to you. That's going to be that's an experience. Okay, thank you for the visual on that one, by the way.
But so I would tell myself that really a lot. Well, that's not going to happen. So anything else is less. So just go for it. And that's changed over the years. But when I, in dialogue with people, they have a lot of different things. May not be that simple. Age is a good one. I think if you tell yourself, if not now, then when, that'll get you moving. But there's a lot of stuff in our subconscious that scare the daylights out of us. We may not even be aware of it and it's been controlling us all of our lives. And it's really a wonderful thing if you can come face to face with that. Maybe you can't do it by yourself, but you got a good friend or a colleague or something that can walk you through it, because these giants are not real. Let me give you a quick example. I was talking to my son. He's not going to care. And the oldest one, these guys don't care what I say. They say mom's always telling on us. But the older one's IQ is extremely high. And we were just having a conversation about that. And it jumped, I said, oh, yeah, well, remember you took that test and blah, blah, this is your IQ and your number. And he looked at me and said, really? And I said, I'm thinking like, this is not news, right? He said, really? I didn't realize that. And what came after that really took me out. He said, had I known that about myself, I would have made a lot of different decisions. But here I am messing around with thus and so, and I didn't know that. And I'm thinking, I can't say he didn't know it, but the thing that was really arresting in the conversation was that he said, had I known. So it was something there that said that you don't have what it takes to do whatever. But when I told him that, he said, well, I could have. I said, well, you still can. He said, yeah. And his whole demeanor, it just changed. It just,
And that gets into the whole thing, and I'll tell you, did you tell him? Yes, you absolutely told him. Did he know? Mm-hmm. No, he absolutely didn't know. For some reason that we do not understand at all, he was not able to receive that and hear that and own that. Mm-hmm. I have no idea what's going on and what might have brought that about. But he was told, and he didn't get it. And he says that would have changed his life. And maybe that's true. And maybe there's something that happened in his life that would have been different, that was important to happen, which is why he wasn't able to hear it. So and there's false evidence assumed real. If we're making the assumption that I should have known that because somebody told me that, I'm sure he doesn't disbelieve you when you said, hey, you took this test and we told you the number and what it meant. I'm sure he's not going to say, well, no, you didn't. You're lying. You're gaslighting me, Mom. I don't think he's going to say this. Well, something happened there. There was something missing.
Yeah, and I wonder, something missing, but then there's a thing about, people have dreams of their own and they don't hear it, or it doesn't click, it doesn't click with whatever it is. It's those kind of little things that show up in different ways in people's lives. And it affects everything that they do and how they think and the choices that they make. And they're operating sometime on an assumption that's not true. you know.
Yep.
So you got to have a good friend or something, to help.
Who you
to
who you
make,
trust and who you'll listen to. I mean, one of
yeah.
the most amazing things in Louise Hay, in her book You Can Heal Your Life, is she's worked with thousands of clients over the years, and she said uniformly the one thing they all had in common was the fear and the belief that they weren't worth or worthy of anything more.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the inability to believe that, to understand it, to hear it, to say, yeah, I am worth it. I am good enough. I do have what it takes to make this happen. On the one hand, that lets us step into our greatness. And on the other hand, how terrifying. What? Nobody else to blame if it doesn't go right.
Yeah, it's the other side of that is there's an assumption that because you have certain attributes or certain things that you will do this, you will do that, and if you don't have it, you won't. And that's absolutely not true. I am so amazed at people's gifts and the beauty that's inside of them. And they think it's worthless because it's not whatever, and that's I think it's just so sad. You know, James Allen in his As a Man Thinketh, I think it's chapter 6, he talks about beauty and the dreamers of this world. And I just like go into another place when I read that because it really talks about how certain things that people have as natural abilities, dreamers and writers and the ones that, he said, the ones that create heaven in our minds. Those are the beautiful dreamers of the world and they are not valued. And that's sad because you find somebody else that has another dream or another manifestation of God in their life that's more highly valued. And that's fine and that's good. But what about the dreamers, and the others that make life beautiful? I'm thinking about a musician that I knew in high school, just a disgustingly talented dude. And
Disgustingly. I love it.
just insanely talented. And I met him again after all these years, and he's been all over the world and blah 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 blah. He said, but I never could understand why people didn't find what I do as valuable. And and I thought, yeah, that's just how people look at who you are and what you bring to the world. Yet without beautiful music, where will we be?
Oh yeah. Well,
We'd
there's
be
a
at
whole bunch. There's a whole bunch of places where that applies. Let's take a break, and we'll come back and we'll talk about how healers get paid. Are you ready to get results? Now, that's not a rhetorical question. Are you ready to get results? RUR2GR. That's actually the abbreviation for the steps in a practical prayer: recognition, unification, realization, gratitude, and release, with a couple of extra steps in there in case some doubt creeps in along the way. RUR2GR. This class is about the prayer technique that's common to all of the spiritual practices and religions in the most effective prayers that they have. And by effective, I mean that the prayer works. It actually creates a change in the experience of the person doing the prayer. It gets a result. We're going to begin with theory, and then we're going to take it into practice. By the end of the class, you will have your very own practical prayer that will help create transformation in your life.
Welcome back to the Practical Prayer Podcast. I'm Carol with Reverend Dr. Bill Marchiony.
And we're talking about fear at the heart of it, and then we kind of devolved into how we value things. And before the break, I mentioned that we will discuss how healers get paid. Because when you think of surgeons, you think of somebody with very high level of skill, and they're at the top of the medical profession, and they get paid top dollar for using their skill and their precision with their hands and their understanding of the instruments to bring about change and transformation in people's lives. And there are psychotherapists who make a very nice living as well. And there are Reiki practitioners who do energy healing, who get paid a lot less than the surgeons. And then there are practical prayer practitioners, the group that do practical prayer on behalf of other people. And not a whole lot of work. There's some practitioners who are making, a comfortable living just doing prayer work for other people, but there are very few who are doing that. And the fact of the matter is, when the prayer works, you don't need the surgeon.
Mm-hmm.
And there,
Yeah.
and there are enough stories of when that happens. And for the patient, that's a better experience to not have to go through surgery and just have whatever it is go away, or seem to go away. But the value is seen as completely different. Mm-hmm. There's a whole profession, and I don't think it has too much to do with the white coat and the stethoscope. I've tried wearing those, and nobody takes me nearly as seriously as they do the surgeons.
You think?
I don't know what's up with that.
Okay. Yeah.
And the other group that, when you think about teachers, it's like, well, yeah, okay, they're in a room full of, snotty-nosed little 8-year-olds, and, so somebody's got to take them through the process. But the fact of the matter is, those snot-nosed little 8-year-olds are going to grow up to be our leaders and our thinkers and the people who are going to change and maintain and uplift our world. So it seems like perhaps an investment in that would be in order. Mm-hmm. Even if it were completely self-serving, to have that group of people who are coming on and much more qualified and able to save us and undo the crap that we've done, that'd probably be worthwhile too. But we don't think of it that way. Mm-hmm. There's always the teachers are buying, school supplies out of their pocket money, just so they have, so they can do their job. Mm-hmm. So an interesting perspective or transposition.
And that really does touch on what we were talking about with fear, because nobody wants to be not valued or appreciated. And if this gift that you have, this wonderful gift that you have to bring to the world, you're intended to bring it, for some reason in your experience, and it could be quite real, the experience, that that this particular thing is not valued, then there's a fear, and sometimes it's not just not valued, but criticized. And so then you don't do that great thing that you could do. And that's really sad, because not only does the world, and I always think of things globally, but not just the world, but those around you are not able to participate or benefit, particularly let's say healing. I mean, that's great example of it. And people just don't they don't buy it.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes people leave here before they have to, simply because they don't buy it. But maybe that's a whole nother broadcast. I don't know. It's just fear. I think gets in the way all over the place. In terms of acting from yourself, or receiving from someone else, or receiving what Spirit or God or the universe has for you. There's that fear that, people are going to think I'm weird, or I'm not really sure that works, or whatever.
Yeah, I've spent a fair amount of time with musicians, songwriters and singers, performers, and some of them, have gone through and broken through. So there was a young songwriters contest that we were involved in 15 years ago, and one of the participants in it was Benj Pasek. And so he's written Broadway shows now, and he's the one who did La La Land, or whatever, the movie. I mean, so he has gone on to be huge, tremendous success. And there were, and have been, and are others who are equally talented, sometimes in different directions, who have either struggled or been unwilling to give up their day job because they need to fund their lifestyle, and the fear stopped them. Now, should it have? It's not for me to say. there's a reason that we have a day job, and there are some musicians who are supporting their family with their day job, and they're sharing their gifts and talents and skills, doing IT support for a corporation or clients all over the place, and then they're writing their music and going down to the open mic and singing and doing house parties and things like that, house concerts, and they're sharing their music and their gifts and their skills on a different level. Now, if I'm going to say the one who's on Broadway is the success, and his music obviously is better than the one who's singing to people in a New Thought spiritual community and touching hearts there, it's not for me to say. I don't know. Is the fear real?
And I'm not sure. I mean, it's real, but the one on Broadway and the one that plays the jazz thing down at what's that place down on Columbia Avenue? Whatever, Columbus Boulevard. Used to be a little jazz club down there. I'd go to. Who's to say who's better? It's not. You can't, because they're bringing healing and wholeness and joy and love and all of that to the world. Is it better on a larger scale or a not so larger scale? And sometimes I'm thinking the people in the seats determine how large your scale is going to be.
Yep, that's true.
Which is gets us back to trying to say what is really valuable and important. I mean, what's important? I told you about a concert that I want to go to, and I never once thought about how much the ticket was going to be. Never once, because it doesn't matter. I mean, unless it's six figures, but doesn't matter. It does something for me. I'm going. I determine the value of what that person is offering to the world, but I appreciate it, and I just, and
there's uplift available.
Yeah, and it's
later this year, I'm going to be at Unity Village for the Anton annual retreat, and I'm one of the co-chairs of it. And I really look forward to that for a lot of reasons. There's wonderful uplift and speakers and stuff. But this year, the music director, is Daniel Nahmod. And I love getting together with Daniel Nahmod because he is so kind and so gentle and so talented and so willing to share his gifts and so clear about who he is. What a gift. And he's been very successful doing music in the New Thought and the spiritual arena. And he's actually been successful. He has an alternate band that does dysfunctional pop songs, which have gotten a little bit of notoriety. And he's completely authentically himself. I'm already, it's months away, and I'm already looking forward to having the opportunity to dive in deeper with him and get filled and fed, because it happens to me a lot. And I think that's where the success is. Is somebody making a ton of money by doing that? That would be nice. Is it crucial? Maybe not. Being able to pursue our art and share our gifts without having to put them on hold and back burner them until we retire is find out a way to do that is probably a good idea. I'm going to go with that. I think that's a good idea, is to find a way to share the gifts in the moment rather than postpone it, even if it's just turning the faucet on for a trickle. Let something come out. Let something happen.
Yeah. And again, I'm going to say it's two sides to that. It's persons that need to understand the value, the true value of what somebody is doing, what they're sharing. It can take you to, that thing, it takes you to another place. But if it helps you to meditate or free something in you or allows you to escape for a moment from the vicissitudes of life and allows you to think and dream and all of that, or rest. Those are the kind of things that we don't put a lot of value on. Downtime, being quiet, being in a space where God can speak and all that. You think, okay, that's nice, and I'll do that when I get to a certain place in life. And if you don't, you get to a certain place in life and you're bats. So
okay.
Yeah,
Two things.
right. Yeah.
First off, you get a point for using the word vicissitudes.
Okay.
which was just lovely. And after the break, we are going to do a practical prayer. And it's going to be about being aware of our gifts and what we have to offer.
Get inspiration in an instant. God calls are the gentle and uplifting moment of truth to help you remember that the bright light of God's love is shining right now as you
It's your God Call with Reverend Bill.
start your 2-week free trial today, and you'll get a phone call 4 times a week from Reverend Bill with an uplifting half-minute message filled with insight, wisdom, story, and fun.
Let your light shine.
You can answer the call to listen to it live or let it go to voicemail so you can hear it later. After the free trial, your subscription is just $5.95 a month. The details are at godcall.org. God calls are disruptive, intentionally.
Whenever you write something, put on a gold star.
They take you away from your routine to remind you about the truth of who you really are. They come at random times between 8:15 a.m. and 6 p.m., so you won't be expecting them. And somehow, the message is exactly what you need to hear at the time.
Magic is loose in the world.
It's a moment of motivation in the middle of your day. Find out more and start your 2-week free trial now at godcall.org.
Welcome back to the Practical Prayer Podcast. I'm Carol here with Reverend Dr. Bill Marchiony. Conversation was great.
Yeah. And try this line on for size. I'm doing what I'm doing because they expect it. Just makes me want to scream. I'm doing what I'm doing because they expect it. And that puts the decision on somebody else, probably with an assumption of what it is that they're expecting, and the limitation of if they didn't expect it, then I might be doing something different. And there's just so much packed up into that, and it all comes back to fear. I'm doing what I'm doing because they expect it. I'm afraid what's going to happen if I don't, because it's going to upset the apple cart. It's going to tumble the status quo, and then things will be different. They will be unknown. Fact of the matter is, there's only 2 things that humans are inherently fearful of. One is the startle response. If you set off a loud noise right behind somebody, they will have a startle response. That's fear, and that's to save us from something huge exploding over our shoulders. It's nice to duck. And the other one is fear of heights. There is an inbred natural fear of heights. When we get up onto something really high up, there's a fear there. And there are some segments of the population that get really comfortable with heights, but that's because they're able to overcome and minimize the fear and stand on the top of cliffs or steel girders in buildings that are being constructed. Everything else, though, falls into the category of a false evidence appearing real or being assumed real. And we can let go of that. And the way to let go of that is to go to the bigger picture. So let's pray about that. Let's pray about being guided to let go of our fears, to embrace our gifts and what's possible. So we turn our attention away from the details of our lives and the stories that we can tell and everything that's on the resume. And instead of letting that define who we are or what we are, turn our attention to that infinite creative power that creates everything. God, spirit, nature, source, whatever it is, that one has been sharing itself since the very beginning of time. Everything that exists is that one taking its own form in a particular way. That includes me and each person within the sound of my voice. So that infinite intelligence, that divine love, that's the truth of what we are, is available to us in our awareness right here and right now. So as we ask ourselves in this quiet space, what's important? What are my gifts? What am I bringing? What can I offer? And then quiet our mind, so instead of trying to think of the answer, we get out of the way and allow that infinite intelligence that knows everything, that creative force that has created us, that knows what our gifts and talents and skills and abilities are, and have that be revealed. And instead of being worried about how I'm going to be able to make a living doing that, or how the pieces are going to fit together, or how I'm going to tell my family that that's what I'm doing, or how any of the rest of that, how is none of our business. Our business is to open ourselves to that divine guidance and let this creative intelligence that knows how to make galaxies make something new as us, through us, for us, with us. Because that good is available now. It's always available. Whatever that unique combination of skills and talents and gifts and abilities happens to be, it is our opportunity to recognize it, to claim it, to own it, to rock it, to be it, and to let that combination come out in a way that is unique to us. There's a gift that's at hand right here and right now, and I'm so, so grateful for it. I'm grateful for the clarity. I'm grateful for the insight and the awareness, the understanding of that good that's already unfolding. And I am grateful to be able to speak this word and release it into that creative law, the one that has created everything, the one that is creating everything, and to know without any question, hesitation, or doubt whatsoever that it's now creating this clarity, this wisdom, this insight, and the sharing of these gifts is already underway. So I let it be. I speak this word and let it be. And so it is.
The Practical Prayer Podcast with Reverend Bill Marchiony and Carol Lawrence is a production of BeTheLight.com,
be-the-light.com,
where you can find more information about practical prayer for real results.
Our theme is by Music of Wisdom. You can learn about the spiritual community of New Thought Philadelphia with daily guided meditations,
Weekly celebrations of spirit,
and Reverend Bill's classes in practical spirituality
at newthoughtphilly.org.
And that is the session for the Practical Prayer Podcast for today. I loved that prayer. That was fun.
That prayer was, I don't like to say good, because it's like that was...
Well, it's good for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's always good. Sometimes some things just pop.
Yeah, I thought that's what I felt this time.
Yeah.
So it resonated with me. And, one of the things that I didn't talk about is that I have technical skills and I have creative skills. And it took me forever to understand that that's unusual. I know. I didn't know how unusual it was to be able to build a broadcast studio and then do the character voices and write the comedy that's going to get produced in it.
Wow.
And it turns out there were very few people in the same category with me.
Okay. And so how do you feel about that now? I mean, once you realized it, then what happened?
Then I understood why there weren't a whole lot of other people who had the same combination that I had. And I also understood that I could use the combination to do things that other people couldn't do. Mm-hmm. So I was able to combine and offer up those gifts. I mean, I did that. My signature comedy bit was the closing show credits for the Morning Zoo. So today's show is brought to you by that's some bogus thing with a funny little thing, and what I did is I syndicated that. And so I took it and I offered it up to a bunch of different radio stations. And what we did is we came up with a template script for each of the stations. And then I came up with the stuff that we were going to drop into it every morning. And I wrote a little computer program on my Macintosh that would combine all the scripts together and then connect to CompuServe and send them to the radio stations overnight so they would have the script that they could print out when they got there in the morning. Mm-hmm. This was before everybody had email, so like one of the hurdles for stations getting involved in this is they had to get online with a CompuServe account. Mm-hmm. So it's not a thing now. There were certainly people who could have written the comedy, and there were certainly people who could have created that personalization distribution system, but there were very few people who could do both. Mm-hmm. It took a long time for me to understand that.
Yeah. And you use it now in your work?
Yeah, well, not the CompuServe part, because that's sort of run its course.
Yeah.
But I'm still doing the same thing. and understanding that when I'm talking is to, I'm the guy who does technology for ministers. And ministers are a group that tend to be, I'm not going to say technophobic, but they're focused on something other than how the technology is going to work. And sometimes they just want it to work. But they want it to work as quickly and as effectively for them as it does for somebody who's learned how to use it without having to learn how to use it. So I can understand the technology, and I can also understand the minister. So I'm able to be present with them and say, yeah, you're going to have to spend 20 minutes learning how to do this, and then it's going to save you an hour a day. So it'll be worth it, but not until tomorrow.
Good luck.
It's interesting. It's interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting that you said that, because I was with a group, I think it was yesterday, that came up, and it was a group of ministers, and they were not at all interested in the tech part of this world, what this world is coming to. And I understand the technology. At least I understand how it works. I can't work all of it, but I certainly see how the pieces all fit together. And I felt like I said, wait a minute, nobody's paying me to encourage you guys. But this is the way it's going, and we got to open our eyes and be open to how what we do fits into it, and it can be done better. And suddenly I understood why there's evolution. And
the survival of the fittest.
Yeah.
Some of them are going to, I mean, everybody learned how to do Zoom church, during the lockdown. And some people really did it badly, and some people really did it well, and some people just couldn't wait to stop as soon as we can say, okay, lockdown is over, we're finished, we're never doing that again. And others have turned that into their ministry, because now there's the possibility of, it's wonderful to get people to jump in their car and drive down to the place and sit in the room with us. But the ones who aren't going to do that, either because they're half a continent away or because they don't feel like getting out of their jammies this morning, if they can still participate, then the reach of our ministry remains extended. So, do we want them to not come down and sit with us? No. But if they're not going to come down and sit with us anyway, then maybe it's worth learning how the Zoom's going to work, and dealing with the limitations. You want to frustrate yourself, like impossibly? Try and sing 3-part harmony with people who are on Zoom.
Well, just don't do it.
Exactly, just don't do it.
Just don't do it.
It doesn't work, and I can tell you why it doesn't work. But if you don't know that it doesn't work, get 3 friends, preferably from different continents, because that'll make it much, much more pronounced. And start singing. And no, there's not a setting in Zoom that's going to fix that. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with Zoom. There's nothing wrong with Zoom.
No, there's nothing wrong with Zoom. I start out by saying, look, this is different. Okay, this is just different. Not the same thing done in a different whatever. This is different. There are some common points, right? Prayer and all that other stuff is common, but everything else is different. So if you bring the attitude or the expectation that this is church online, I think you're going to bomb out. I do. It's not church online, because there's so much, and this goes for anything, but it's so much in the personal, person-to-person space that doesn't translate. And if you're clear about that from the beginning, I think you have a decent chance to survive.
Yeah, and if you take advantage of the stuff that you can do on Zoom that you can't do otherwise. Like, you can have a one-on-one with somebody who's going to do prayer with you instantly, instead of having to make a phone call, make an appointment, drive, park, go in, wait your turn. It is possible for things to happen at a much, much accelerated pace. There's a lot of stuff that's possible that wouldn't otherwise be possible. I think I've told the story before about back in the good old days, would go to the airport and fly to a different city and then stay overnight, rent a car, and go to an appointment that I had, and would be told by the receptionist, "Oh, I'm so sorry, family emergency, you can't make it today." So it's like, all right, my flight's not till 5 tonight. I guess I'm hanging around in Denver for a while. And we don't have to do that now, because meetings still get canceled, but it got canceled. I'm sitting at my desk at home. I haven't driven anywhere. I didn't earn any frequent stay points at the Marriott last night, but it's an inconvenience rather than something bigger. So there's a gift. There's always a gift.
Absolutely, and it's okay. Those who wanted to go back to the live church and sit in the pew and the doors are open, that's fine. And that's no shade to those who decide, look, I'm not doing that anymore, for whatever their reasons. It's cool, and I just think it's so exciting how diverse God is in creation and creating things. It wasn't the pandemic that made all this happen, because God doesn't evolve, I don't think. God just is. And because it's like, God didn't create the promised land as the Israelites were going toward it. It was already there. So all of it.
Good point.
Yeah. So we're just discovering what has always been. And I just think that that's an amazing way to approach it, because you're discovering it. You say, ooh, now I can do this, this, and this. Doesn't mean that part isn't good, but I did an internet radio show in the early 2000s when internet radio just got started. And I said that this is for people who still want to have a relationship with God, but don't find your place in the local church. I don't know where I got that from, but the listenership skyrocketed beyond anything I could imagine. And it got so big so quick, I wasn't expecting it. Now, it didn't really matter because the message was the message, but the idea that resonated with people. And it's cool that if you didn't find your place in the local church, I'm telling you it's okay. Well, that's not something that you tell people. You tell them
Not as a mouthpiece for one of the churches.
No,
that's
and
for
I
sure.
mean, and then I'm one that, listen, I had a mic on Sunday in the church, but I had the nerve to say that, on a internet radio show. It's like, what are you saying? It's okay. It's just all right. God is so cool to show up wherever there's an opportunity, if that's the way you want to think about it. We can do that.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Carol. Let us leave it at that. This is the Practical Prayer Podcast post show on New Thought Media Network. And thank you to everybody who has been listening. And next week, we are recording episode number 104, which is 2 full years of the Practical Prayer Podcast. Very exciting. We're going to spend the next week thinking about what we're going to forget to do for next week.
I know.
Or maybe we'll actually think of something.
Yeah. You know what? This is funny. This is my favorite necklace. I thought this was
pretty.
episode 104. So I wore my favorite necklace for the 2-year anniversary.
Well, then this was a dress rehearsal for 104.
Yeah, so I got to figure out, what I want to do next week. But that's
Maybe
cool.
they're shopping. Maybe there's shopping to happen. There's a Mother's Day between now and then. Anything could happen.
Anything could happen. Except the shopping. I ain't doing that, honestly. I don't have fun doing that.
See you next week.
See ya.
The Practical Prayer Podcast with Reverend Bill Marchiony and Carol Lawrence is a production of BeTheLight.com,
b-the-light.com.
where you can find more information about practical prayer for real results.
Our theme is by Music of Wisdom. You can learn about the spiritual community of New Thought Philadelphia with daily guided meditations,
Weekly celebrations of spirit
and Reverend Bill's classes in practical spirituality
at newthoughtphilly.org.
Thank you, Center for Spiritual Living Denver, for your continued support. Thank you, Center for Spiritual Living Midtown Atlanta, for your monthly contribution. Thank you Center for Spiritual Living North Jersey for your monthly contribution. And please help us welcome Om Center for Spiritual Living in La Mesa, California. Thank you for your monthly donation. Thank you Center for Spiritual Living Seattle for your most generous donation. And a special thanks to Hefferlin Foundation for your generous technology grant. And Suze Ajit, thank you for your very generous donation. And a super special thank you to Dr. Tracy Brown, RSCP. Thanks for being a super donor. And a big shout out to all our committed donors.